We're here with David Brown, who wants to discuss his experiences with the flying car. I understand that you worked at NASA for most of your life. Can you please describe from university onwards what path led you to NASA and the flying car?
Well, first starting out, I really got excited about computers. My friend, Mr. Archibald, was on the police department in Newark, California, and he was the first police officer to have the computer in the police station. And I saw his son typing in a BASIC program, and I got excited about that. I also studied computers at Lawrence Hall of Science around the age of 10 years of age, and they had presentations, and so I got excited about computer programming. So I went to Covenant College on Lookout Mountain in Georgia. That's a wonderful place, and a very scenic place to go to school, and I studied computer science there. And while I was there, I also studied artificial intelligence, and I studied art. I loved art, and I wanted to art major, but I stuck with computer science and math. I got a math minor. And so with those degrees, I immediately got hired at Link Flight Simulation in Sunnyvale, California. I grew up in Newark, California, which is right near Sunnyvale, in the San Francisco Bay Area. And Lookout Mountain was just a great place to go away to school so I could find out what the South was like and see some other part of the United States. And many people ask why I didn't go to Berkeley or some of these other schools. Well, Covenant College actually had a very fine computer science department and great access to the computer equipment. And so I really had unlimited access to the computers. At that day, we didn't have personal computers. We had to have the big computer. So I was able to really master the VAX computing system. And when I got to Link Flight Simulation, they use VAX computers. They also use Linux computers, which I quickly learned all the ins and outs of visual systems. I worked on the microcode, which is the software that resides on the cards, the computer cards itself. And these programs had to reside there because they had to run really fast to do the computer graphics of the day. There were about 10 cabinets filled with giant computer cards. That is equivalent to even what's less than the computer graphics you have in your phone now. But at the time...
So you were using punch cards, is that right?
Well, no, the accounting system was still on punch cards, but we used terminals, and we used editors. The VAX and Linux both had editors. The Linux had the VI editor, which is kind of a primitive editor compared to Word. But as a programmer, you get used to this primitive editor, which can do quite astounding things, and it allows you to write your programs on the terminal, compile them, and debug them fairly quickly. And so while there at Link, I learned about military operations, how to build a gaming area where the military would do training. I helped improve processes there where we could do the computer graphics faster and design airfields and training areas, landscapes where helicopters and jets would fly. I worked on the F-111 radar database where we would do napier flying. For those of you who don't understand this type of radar, it creates a little screen with a map of the Earth under you. It's a black and white image, green and white if you will, that is of the return of the beam hitting the hills and the water. It would create, you could see clearly the features, and you have your strip chart next to you, and you could flip by the map. The strip charts for the pilots is the map all laid out on the trip they're going on. So they flip it, and you'd line it up with your terrain following radar, and this would allow you to navigate very, very efficiently. So with this experience, I got hired at NASA Ames Research Center about 5.5 years after I started at Link, and I was able to work on their Advanced Concepts Flight Simulator, ACFS. And we worked on the Boeing 727, which was quickly converted to a 747. So during that time, I upgraded the computer systems and the visual systems. The visual systems then became even more powerful, where they were able to, we had half domes going across the screen where we could view a 180-degree angle, which were beautiful cockpit views, as opposed to collimated displays, which basically did not allow you to look across the screen. You had to look straight, and that's all you could see. But over the years, that improved as well. When finally we ended up with PCs, with computer graphics boards, which were now the finest computer graphics. And so with the scenery was my expertise, but then I quickly learned all of aspects of the flight simulator, throttle systems, how to use feedback loops using the joystick, which is a fly-by-wire system, as well as on the 7.4 we had a stick, the normal stick for flying, and the buttons and switches I was able to program. Also, we had what we called an EOS display, which is an experiment operator station, where we could press buttons like we had them called IP, initial position. You press the button, and we move the simulator so that when you look outside, could be like 3 miles out from the runway, or 10 miles out. And it would put you in a certain position, altitude. We set the wind, we set the weather, might turn fog on, might put some clouds, might have some other airplanes flying. When you hit the IP button, it would set those parameters. So if you wanted less wind or more wind, you could press a different IP button. So depending on the experimenter's request, that is, when we set up the experiment, the parameters of the experiment, the conditions of the experiment, we would then be able to see that. Now all this leads up to my experience of aviation, because a lot of the research we were doing had to do with ATM, or air traffic management, and the design of our airspace. And as I was moving along through these experiments, we also worked on intelligent flight controllers. That is, how do we fly the airplane if you lose part of your wing, or if you lose your flap, or if you lose your ailerons? Those are other surfaces. These are all the surfaces. You have the rudder as well. If you lose control of those, how can you fly the airplane? And so we had an intelligent, basically a computer, onboard computer, that would compensate for if those surfaces were broken or stuck in a certain position. And if they were, how did you fly the plane? Because when you move the stick, it didn't handle the same. So in that situation, instead of flying the airplane with the normal yoke and rudders controls, you would just use the automatic pilot. And the automatic pilot would then compensate with a feedback loop, which would say, hey, I'm not getting enough turn or lift, and then you could fly the airplane still. And so with this AI intelligence, and with the concepts of free flight, that is being able to set a route where you could fly anywhere in the country, working with the air traffic control, air traffic controllers, they have to organize the airspace and make sure no airplane crashes into another airplane. And they do this by a concept called separability, which they monitor by the bird's eye view. They're looking down on all the traffic on their radar screens, and now their computer screens showing where each airplane is, and they look at what altitude they are, and they can see if there's any problem. Now, along with all this experience, we then moved on to a new area where it was called UAS, unmanned UAS, unmanned air system, right? Which is basically a drone, and these drones were used in the war, and the military would fly them. Well, here's what problem occurred: is when they brought them home after the big war, they wanted to fly a drone from one military base to another military base, but it was against the law. And some people say, well, I don't want them flying in our airspace anyway because I don't want them to blow me up. Well, you could argue that about any military vehicle. We fly fighter jets over us all the time, and we don't worry about that. We're not concerned about that because we have laws against our own military attacking us, and that's a constitutional rights issue. But the point is that they could not do it legally because the drones fly lower and slower than other airplanes, and so therefore it was a dangerous thing to do, and so we had to do a simulation. And so we have simulated air traffic controllers, we have simulated pilots, we call those pseudopilots, and we were able to put the experiment together such that we would fly a lot of airplanes, a lot of airplane traffic. At the same time as we're flying drones, I had to do a very complicated scenario where I moved the traffic from Oakland, that is all the air traffic flying into Oakland airspace, that's San Francisco Airport and Oakland Airport and San Jose airports. All that traffic that flowed in there, I moved over to, which is now Armstrong NASA Center, Armstrong Research and Flight Center. The Air Force Base is Edwards Air Force Base. It's out in Lancaster County. That's where the space shuttle would land on many occasions. So at this base, we had permission to fly our drones. So I moved the traffic on the computer so that all that same traffic that normally flies in San Francisco now was flying around Edwards Air Force Base on the computer. But the drones would fly amongst the airspace, but the air traffic controllers would see on their screen all the traffic, and so it'd be a busy airspace as though we had drones flying through a busy airspace such as San Francisco area. And so during that experiment, we discovered how to keep them separate so that we could fly them from one military base to another along with other commercial airplanes. And so now that we have accomplished that, I said, why don't we, that was about 6 years ago that we started this, I said, why don't we start doing this for drones or flying cars so we can create an airspace that is a safe way for flying cars to fly in our airspace with other airplanes, as well as fly around cities. And so since Ames is a leader in doing this research, the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, counts on us. They come to us to do this research. This is very important research, and to keep our airways safe. So once we do the research, we publish the papers, we document how it's done, then the FAA sets down those procedures as law, and then they govern the airspace to keep us all safe. So during that time, my friend Dr. Prevost went to Uber, and Uber is working on a flying car because, as you know, Uber is a taxi company. So the same concept could happen, that you could punch into your phone, say, I want a car, and I want to go to San Francisco, and I need it within the next half an hour or something. You can plug it in, schedule it. In comes a flying car. You get into the flying car, and it drives you to your location. Or another way of looking at it would be that you have your own car that's parked in your garage, and you can fly it out. Now, flying car is done with the typically with the small blades, similar to the drones. And right now, there's a car called Blackfly flying car that you can look up on the internet, and they're hoping to get the price down around the price of an SUV, but right now they're pretty expensive. But as more people get into it, the price will drop, so it'll be affordable like a car. And so the idea is, right now the cars are not quite all developed yet, not all perfectly, but part of the biggest battle is the politics of the bureaucracy of setting down the rules. And by bureaucracy, we're talking about all of the FAA and NASA and federal government that has to set down the rules for the safe travel of flying cars. Now, these flying cars, they may come in all shapes and sizes and have different purposes. Some will be taxis, some will be one parked in your garage, some will be used for enjoyment at an amusement park, some will be farmers that can fly their airplanes on their property as much as they want in any fashion they wish. So there'll be all kinds of uses for the flying car. But the concept that I present is one where no individual can fly the flying car in commercial airspace, that is around homes. Because after 9/11, we now have seen evidence that, a flying car could be used as a bomb, and it could ran into any building, schools, this sort of thing. So the only safe way I see of this concept working is the FAA would fly the plane. So for crash landings or for emergencies where they lost communication with the FAA, there would be an artificial intelligent flight controller that could fly you to a safe landing. Or there may be a manual control override that the FAA would release to you once they lost communication. But the idea is that the vast majority of traffic would be controlled by the FAA. So you'd get in your car, you'd punch in, I want to go to San Francisco, I want to go to the corner of A and 25th Street, something like this, and then it would find a parking spot for you with a charging stations, because these cars have a 25-minute battery so far, but the idea is as soon as you get there, you have to recharge. So the whole system will have to be set up to find you a parking spot first. And then once it's found a parking spot, then it would say, okay, you're ready to go, and FAA would get the message from your phone or car. Your phone would talk to your car, and so on and so forth. It might be integrated. So anyway, you punch that in. FAA gets your flight plan. The flight plan is your directions, just like you look on Google Maps. You can see you punch in directions. It would punch in the directions where you want to go, and the FAA would then fly your car. You'd say, it would check with your system. You're ready to go. Everybody's safe in their seatbelts. You hit the button. It says, I'm ready to go. And the FAA takes over, flies your car. And let's say someone says, oh, I got to go back. Well, you got to tell FAA we're going back. And you hit the return button, and the FAA would fly you back. Now you say, wait, but I don't have control over my car. What do? I don't have my control, but you will have control of your car. Just you'll be communicating with the FAA to do it. So the FAA is going to let you do whatever you want, except within reason. They don't want you to turn around running into another car. So the way this whole system works is that you have autonomy in where you want to go, but we also have protection that the FAA will control how the car flies, and they will let you go at the time when it's safe. So, if there's another car coming by, they'll calculate that, and a lot of it will be done by computer control. FAA will have computers that say, well, this car will get to this spot at this time and calculate their projected, might be an intersect point where they could collide. They'll predict that ahead of time, have your car deviate slightly on course so to avoid completely the other cars. And so this is how the system would have to work. We could have no cars flying independently. Now we have commercial pilots with helicopters. You can always still get a helicopter ride for those purposes. And so the flying car is mainly for commuters and those traveling via taxi service. So, here's the beauty of the plan. With 25, right now they've got the battery working at 25 minutes. But from downtown Danville over here, you could arrive in San Francisco in 25 minutes. Whereas, and you would they'll probably have some sort of high-rise parking garage where you'd come flying in, where it would have a parking spot for you with a charging station. You come gliding in and you can sit there. But the point is, you could be in San Francisco from Danville or from Walnut Creek. Walnut Creek, I think that's enough distance. I was trying to compare places, but basically anywhere here in the East Bay. If you try to go over the Bay Bridge, it typically takes you 3 hours to get to downtown San Francisco. Whereas if you could fly via car, you'd be there in 25 minutes, which makes living outside San Francisco so much better. And then you might say, well, there'll be a lot of flying cars. Yeah, there'll be a lot of flying cars flying in, but there's lots of room in the air to do that, as long as they're organized by the FAA and the FAA's computers and the FAA controllers that would keep us all safe. Now, the flying car, the Blackfly flying car, can land in the water. We, of course, would have to have safety systems. If there's some malfunction and you had to land in the water, they float. So they would land in the water, you could float, and then we would have to have probably have a Coast Guard type service that would come and pick you up. So these are the things we have to work out, all the fine details. But that is the general layout of the plan, so that we can have flying cars and fly safely. Another issue that people bring up about flying cars is noise. Noise, we already have a problem. You hear the prop airplanes fly over your house on a daily basis. Even commercial airline jets that are up high, you hear them. So the noise is an issue. However, one of the requirements should be that the flying car does not make that much noise. And then as long as the flying car is quiet enough, it'll be okay. But if the flying cars make such a racket of all them buzzing around. But one noise that we already put up with that is quite noisy are air blowers that clean up leaves. And so that's a similar annoyance. And so, but if you had a lot of flying cars buzzing around that made that similar noise, it might drive us all crazy. So one of the requirements that I believe that we need to overcome, that is disadvantages, possible disadvantages that we need to overcome, is the noise of the cars. So that's an issue. Then, so the safety concerns, I believe, can be eliminated by the air traffic controllers controlling the whole system. The safety issues, they must be highly maintained so that there's no possibility for them to break. If they do break, we need an artificially intelligent flight controller that would bring you to a safe landing. One of the issues would be to clear up the malfunctions is each electric motor of the propellers would be running independently of another. So the big fatal area of breakdown is if the computer broke down on the controller. This is I'm getting more technical here, but the idea is that each of the propellers would keep running if one propeller stopped. And so that way, and we can have redundancy in the system so that you have enough propellers to keep you going, thereby greatly minimizing the possibility of a breakdown. Now, we already have breakdowns. I've seen cars that have broken down, the brakes go on, or somebody shifts into reverse or something, and the car comes to a screeching halt. We have things like that happen all the time. But because this would be an automated system, I think it would actually be a safer system. Same thing is air travel is much safer than ground travel, and that's mostly due to the fact that we have human pilot that might have got 2 hours of sleep the night before, or might be intoxicated, or might have a screaming kid in the back, or might be on the telephone. All of these things increase the possibility of fatalities, and I predict that there'll be far less fatalities with the flying car because we would have to have a very strict maintenance plan that the planes were checked so that they were deemed safe to be on the road or in the air, that is. And flight paths will also have to be chosen so it minimizes the flight of cars going over homes so that they would land in roads if it's deemed unsafe, or if let's say you go halfway on your trip and you say, I've got to stop. Got a kid, it's got to get out and go to the bathroom, something like that. You got to land. You may have you just punch the button, find the nearest bathroom, something like this. You'll have a selection of McDonald's or whatever different locations that you go to. You hit that button, FAA knows, they send you to that location. Now, of course, you don't like that location. You could have another button, let's say the kid says, I don't have to go anymore. You hit back. Next button, return to our original destination. FAA takes you there. Maybe you get halfway to work and say, I've got to stop by the store. Boom, you have that. You say, okay, I'm going to the store now. And so you punch that in and off to the store you go. You're there for a few minutes, get your item, and you're back on the road. These are all things that would be taken care of by having the program handle it. But it would be very similar. You're constantly changing directions on your phone with your navigation computer. We call them GPS today. But essentially a moving map where you can punch in directions. And these directions we navigate with all the time. Now, the directions would be somewhat irrelevant to us. However, we might look at the directions and say, no, that's not quite the right place I want to go, or that's not, I may have to stop and refine my route. So at the beginning, you may punch in, I want to start at my house, I want to stop by McDonald's, get some breakfast, then take off to work. You might have something like that. But these would be factors. You'd have to make sure you have enough battery time, enough battery to get there, and so on and so forth. But I'm just talking about the way the cars are now. But let's say the car has an hour of flight time. Well, you're probably set. You fly, you could just set it so you get to McDonald's and then off to work. You go to work. You go, and then your car is charging. You may hop in it to go to lunch across town. I mean, there'd be a lot of possibilities. You have a lunch meeting down in San Mateo. Buzz over to San Mateo for lunch. It charges while you're at lunch. Buzz back, it charges. By the end of the day, boom, you have enough electricity to get home. So, these all things have to be worked out, so you're constantly having a charged car because it's strictly battery operated. And it's due to the electric car, it's due to the electric motors that of the drones that we've perfected that have made this technology possible. And so this is a very near reality. When I was a kid, I would always dream of having flying cars and watch the Jetsons, and this was a fascinating concept to me. But just the technology was not there. But now the technology is there, well, I see a lot of hope, and I can just see we already have helicopters. So people say, well, how will this work? Well, helicopters are a model that's already existing. A lot of the air traffic control issues have already been worked out by the helicopter model. So and we have airplanes too. So we have to work them in. We'll probably have to have a whole new team of air traffic controllers that would control the flying car. Right now we have a whole team monitoring airplanes and helicopters. And who knows, maybe helicopters will be worked in with the flying cars. But we'd have a whole new set of air traffic controllers that would monitor this traffic. So if you got in a hot situation, they would be on it. You could hit the emergency button. I'm having motor difficulties. The FAA would also be monitoring the health of your car. So there's a lot of issues, but these are the issues we worked out at NASA. These are the issues that have to be completely ironed out for this to fly. But these are in the works. Uber has a 10-year plan that's probably make it to getting their flying car. There's the Black Fly car. I think Boeing is working on flying cars. There's several other, but they're being worked on in secret. So there's a lot of activity going on. I can see that we're very close to having this concept be a reality. And so, society needs to get ready for it. And that's why I'm talking to you today, to let you know that we have a plan in place, that things are going forward, that it's a near reality, and, well, it's a very exciting reality, but we all have to think about it as a community so that we can decide maybe there's certain areas of our town we don't want people flying over, like schools or hospitals. But then, of course, people say, hey, I got to get to the hospital. My wife's going to have a baby. Boom, I got to hit the hospital button. And they make it a priority and get you there. So how do we cross that? Well, I believe as long as the FAA is flying the plane, I think we should be fine. The FAA is already under strict security after 9/11 especially, that people cannot get in there easily and disrupt our traffic. So, because already there's a lot of lives at stake with air travel. This would increase air travel. But I believe there'd be less fatalities because we wouldn't have as many accidents that we have on the road today. Now, one might argue, well, what do we do in bad weather? Weather is definitely an issue because if it's really foggy, air traffic controllers will know where everyone is. But if we have stormy weather where the winds are really strong, that would ground all the vehicles. Now, I don't know quite how to solve this problem because that would put everyone back on the roads. So we still need to improve our ground infrastructure, roads, trains, buses. That still needs to be improved because, especially here in the San Francisco Bay Area, we are just becoming overly crowded. So the flying car concept improves a lot, but when you start getting really bad weather, well, you'd be grounded, and there'd be certain days. But I think in rainy weather, this has to be tested, but that would go along with the design of the car, that rain would not be an issue. And because the FAA is controlling it, they would know whether your car was able to handle the bad weather. And then you'd have to work that out whether you got air sick or things like this. So, in stormy weather. But for the most part, I think that the flying car I think all the answers are being solved. I think the FAA has a handle on it. I think we're going to be able to bring this to fruition. Is it going to be 5, 10 years? Probably 10 years. But that's because they'll start with small test areas and then eventually it'll go to the whole public. So, well, with people like Uber and Amazon and I can't say who all the companies are involved, but there's many companies involved with trying to get flying cars going. And where there's a will, there's a way. And so with the American spirit, I have the highest hopes that will bring this plan to fruition. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.